There is a video, a little girl sitting cross-legged on the floor with a guitar almost as big as she is. She strums it badly. She laughs at herself, and then she starts to sing. Her voice is small and completely unself-conscious. She is not performing for anyone. She is just a child, doing what children do when they feel safe, filling the silence with the sound of herself. Her name was Sara. She was 10 years old. Her head teacher called her an absolute chatterbox who dreamed of being on the X Factor. Her teacher said singing and performing were her happy space. The judge who sentenced the people who killed her described her as a beautiful little girl, full of personality, with an unquenchable spirit. On the 8th of August 2023, Sara Sharif was murdered in her bedroom in Woking, Surrey. She had been beaten with a cricket bat, struck with a metal pole, burned with an iron, bound with packing tape, bitten, scalded, strangled until the hyoid bone in her neck broke. The post-mortem found more than 100 separate injuries, at least 25 broken bones, and here is the part that should make every single person watching this unable to look away. None of this was hidden. Her teachers saw the bruises. Her neighbours heard the screaming. Her stepmother sent photographs of Sara's injuries to her own sisters. Social services received a referral. Authorities were told. And in every single instance, the system looked at what was in front of it and did nothing. Sara Sharif did not fall through the cracks. She was handed to those cracks, one decision at a time, by people who had every opportunity to save her, and didn't. This is the case of Sara Sharif. Not just how she died, but who she was, and what it tells us about every system that was supposed to stand between her and the people who killed her. If stories like Sara's matter to you, subscribe, because these are the cases that deserve to be remembered. Sara Sharif was born on the 11th of January 2013 at Wexham Park Hospital in Slough, England. From the very first day of her life, the world around her was already complicated. Her father, Urfan Sharif, had come to the UK from Pakistan. Before Sara was even born, the family was already known to police and children's services. Surrey County Council had been in contact since 2010. There had been family court hearings before her arrival because of concerns about neglect and violence in the home, including against one of Sara's older siblings. In 2010, that child was found alone in a shop at 3 years old. Urfan was arrested for assaulting Sara's mother, Olga Domin, during an altercation in which he also struck the child, leaving a handprint on their back. In 2011, the child told teachers, "Daddy hit me." In 2012, the child told teachers, "Mummy hit me." This was the home Sara was born into. And yet Sara arrived with all the brightness that children arrive with. She grew into a girl who loved music, who sang to herself constantly, who performed at every opportunity, who talked constantly and laughed loudly and dreamed of standing on a stage in front of thousands of people. Her teacher described her as sassy and happy, the kind of child who fills a room with herself. Sara's mother, Olga, loved her completely, but when Sara was 6 years old, the family courts awarded custody to her father Urfan and his new wife, Beinash Batool. Olga lost her daughter. Olga would later describe what her relationship with Urfan had really looked like. He had strangled her with a belt, poured oil on her and tried to set her on fire, locked her in a room for an entire day. When police arrived, he pretended nothing had happened. This was the man a family court decided should raise Sara. Urfan Sharif had a documented history of violence against women, stretching back years, multiple arrests, multiple allegations, multiple women, and still, the family courts gave him custody of a 6-year-old girl. By 2021, Sara was 8 years old. That year, she began wearing a hijab. The family told her school it was Sara's own choice. No other family member wore one. The Safeguarding Review published in 2025 confirmed what the school should have questioned more carefully. The hijab was hiding the bruises on Sara's face and head. She was 8 years old, and she was already being taught to hide. The judge at sentencing used one specific phrase to describe what happened to Sara in the final years of her life. He called it a campaign of abuse, not a moment of violence, not a breakdown, not an accident, a campaign, sustained, deliberate, escalating. conducted by 3 adults in a family home in Woking, in front of 5 other children, and hidden piece by piece from every authority that came close enough to see it. The abuse had been building for years, but by late 2020, it had become something that even the people around the family could no longer avoid knowing about. In December 2020, Beinash Batool sent her sister Quandila photographs. The photographs showed Sara with obvious, serious bruising to her arms and face. Over the next 2 years, Batool continued sending messages to her sisters. She told them Urfan was beating the crap out of Sara. She described Sara being left covered in bruises and unable to walk. She described one night when Urfan kept Sara up until the early hours, making her do sit-ups as punishment. She described having to physically push Urfan away from Sara to stop him. Her sisters received those messages. They saw those photographs. Over 2 years of documented evidence of what was happening to a child inside that house. Not one of them called the police. Not one of them called social services. They encouraged Batool not to go to the authorities, and Sara remained inside that house. Neighbours at the West Byfleet address later told the court what they had heard through the walls. One described the sounds as shockingly loud, smacking sounds, and what they called gut-wrenching screams from young female children. Another neighbour described constant crying and banging, a door being constantly rattled, the sound of children trying to get out of a locked room. They heard Batool screaming at the children, almost hysterically. One neighbour knocked and asked if everything was okay. The door was shut in their face. One neighbour considered calling social services. They decided against it. Sara endured every day of this. The judge later said she showed unquenchable spirit, that she endured, that she kept going. She was 10 years old. In March 2023, Sara's teacher noticed 3 separate bruises on Sara's face. A golf ball-sized bruise on her cheek, bruising on her chin, bruising around her eye. Sara gave inconsistent explanations. Her account changed when questioned. Her school, St Mary's Primary in West Byfleet, made a referral to Surrey County Council's Children's Services on the 10th of March. 6 days later, social services closed the investigation. No further action. The social worker had not checked what information Surrey police held on the family, had not spoken to the school to understand why a child who had once been bubbly and singing had become quiet, withdrawn and careful with her words. Sara Sharif told the social worker that Sara had lots of marks because of the machinery she was hooked up to when born prematurely. It was a lie. The social worker accepted it. No further action. 1 month later, in April 2023, Sara Sharif told Sara's school he was withdrawing her from education to homeschool her. The school was alarmed. They contacted social services. They were told to re-refer only if there was immediate risk of harm. The homeschooling was reviewed in June 2023. An officer spoke to Sara Sharif by phone, carried out basic checks, confirmed Sara was not open to children's social care, approved. Sara disappeared from the view of every professional who had ever had reason to worry about her. No more teachers, no more classrooms, no more mandatory safeguarding checks, no more eyes, just Sara and 3 adults in a house in Woking. On the 7th of August 2023, 1 day before Sara died, a council home education officer visited the house to check on Sara's learning. They left satisfied. Sara was alive when they left. She was dead within 24 hours. Stay with me, because what happened the following morning is the moment this case changes forever. On the morning of August 9th, 2023, Urfan Sharif, Beinash Batool, Faisal Malik, and 5 children boarded a flight to Pakistan. They left Sara behind. 1 hour after that plane landed in Islamabad, Urfan Sharif called UK police. His voice was calm. He said, "It wasn't my intention to kill her, but I beat her up too much." He said he had legally punished his daughter, that she had died. He gave the address, Hammond Road, Woking. Police arrived at the house on the 10th of August, 2023. They found Sara in her bunk bed. She had been dead for 2 days. She was covered with a blanket. She was 10 years old. The investigation that followed was one of the largest Surrey police had ever mounted. In September 2023, all 3 adults were arrested at Gatwick Airport after flying back to the UK from Dubai. They had remained in Pakistan for weeks. They had taken Sara's 5 siblings with them. They had left Sara's body in a bunk bed under a blanket. All 3 were charged with murder. The trial opened at the Old Bailey in October 2024. 10 weeks of evidence. The prosecution told the jury that Urfan Sharif had created a culture of violent discipline inside that home, where assaults on Sara had become completely routine, completely normalized. A blood-stained cricket bat, a rolling pin with Sara's DNA, a metal pole, a belt, rope, all found in the outhouse of their home, all consistent with the injuries catalogued on Sara's body. Batool's own WhatsApp messages to her sisters, describing in specific, detailed language exactly what was happening to Sara over a period of 2 years. And bite marks, 6 of them on Sara's body. The prosecution told the court they were human, consistent in size and pattern with adult teeth. Urfan Sharif gave evidence. Initially, he denied sustained responsibility. He blamed Batool, said she was the true architect of Sara's suffering. But under cross-examination, he changed his position. He said he took full responsibility for Sara's death. He admitted he had not intended to hurt her. He had beaten a bound 10-year-old child with a cricket bat, strangled her until the bone in her neck broke. And he wanted the jury to understand he had not intended to hurt her. If you are still with me, you already know this case is unlike anything else in recent British criminal history. A child known to every authority that should have protected her. A father who described his own abuse as legal punishment. A system that visited her the day before she died and left satisfied. Subscribe to True Crime Britain if this is the channel you want to come back to, because the next part of this story is the one that should have been prevented most of all. 3 adults were convicted, 1 family sentenced. But investigators, independent commissioners, and review boards were already asking a completely different question. Not just who killed Sara, but how many people, how many systems, how many institutions looked directly at this child and chose to look away. The answer, published in a Child Safeguarding Practice Review in November 2025, is one of the most damning indictments of the British child protection system in modern history. Stay with me. On the 11th of December, 2024, Urfan Sharif and Beinash Batool were convicted of murder at the Old Bailey. Urfan Sharif, life imprisonment, minimum 40 years. Beinash Batool, life imprisonment, minimum 33 years. Faisal Malik, the uncle who had lived in the house for the final 8 months of Sara's life, was convicted of causing or allowing the death of a child. Sentenced to 16 years. Judge Justice Kavanagh addressed the court. He said he had to be careful about using the word torture, that it should not be overused, that it should be applied with precision, and then he said, "But it is no exaggeration to describe the campaign of abuse against Sara as torture." He described the treatment of a 10-year-old child as nothing short of gruesome, almost inconceivable. And then he said the words that should have ended careers and triggered parliamentary hearings. He said Sara's abuse had happened in plain sight, not in secret, not behind closed doors, not in a way that made discovery impossible, in plain sight. In November 2025, the Child Safeguarding Practice Review was published. The Children's Commissioner, Dame Rachel de Souza, said Sara fell off their radar so entirely that by the time she died, she was invisible to them all. The Education Secretary described glaring failures across all agencies. 4 specific failures identified, each one a moment where a different decision could have saved Sara's life. Failure 1. The March 2023 referral, closed in 6 days without checking police records, without speaking properly to the school, and without following up on an explanation that required nothing more than a basic verification to disprove. Failure 2. The homeschooling approval, granted without the additional safeguards that a child with Sara's documented history demanded. She vanished from institutional view in April 2023. She was dead by August. Failure 3. Urfan Sharif had been ordered by the courts to complete a domestic abuse perpetrator program before having unsupervised contact with his children. He never completed it. Nobody followed up. Nobody asked why. Failure 4. Cultural hesitancy. The review identified that professionals sometimes show hesitancy to challenge parents on cultural or religious grounds for fear of appearing prejudiced. Sara began wearing a hijab at 8 years old. No other family member wore one. Professionals did not adequately challenge this explanation, despite the obvious protective function the hijab was serving. She was being hidden in plain sight, and the system was too hesitant to look. And on the 7th of August, the day before Sara died, a council officer visited her home to check on her education. They spoke to the family. They looked around. They left satisfied. What does it mean that a trained professional visited a child living in conditions the judge called torture and left satisfied? It means the system was not looking for what was in front of it. It was looking for what it expected to find. And Sara, who had survived 2 years of escalating abuse by learning to manage the adults around her, knew exactly how to give them what they expected. She was 10 years old, and she was protecting herself from the people who were supposed to protect her. On the 17th of December, 2024, Sara's mother, Olga Domin, issued a statement. She said, "My dear Sara, I ask God to please take care of my little girl. She was taken too soon." Sara had beautiful brown eyes and an angelic voice. Sara's smile could brighten up the darkest room. Everyone who knew Sara will know her unique character, her beautiful smile and loud laugh. She will always be in our hearts. Her laughter will bring warmth to our lives. We miss Sara very much. Love you, Princess. Olga had lost custody of Sara in 2019. She had been banned from seeing her daughter by a man who, at the time of that custody hearing, had already been arrested for violence multiple times. She spent 4 years not knowing exactly what was happening to her child. And in August 2023, she found out the worst way a mother can find out anything. The inquest, examining the wider failures, including the role of the Batool family, who received 2 years of messages and photographs and said nothing, is still ongoing. There is a video, a little girl with a guitar, strumming badly, laughing at herself, singing without self-consciousness, in the way that children do when they feel safe. Her head teacher said she dreamed of being on the X Factor. Her teacher said singing was her happy space. Her judge said she had an unquenchable spirit. She was 10 years old. She had beautiful brown eyes and an angelic voice, a smile that could brighten up the darkest room, and she was failed. Repeatedly, systematically, by every person and every institution whose entire purpose was to ensure that a child like Sara, a child already known to be at risk, already documented, already visible, never fell through. She didn't fall through. She was handed through, one closed file at a time. The case of Sara Sharif is not over. The inquest examining the full picture of how she was failed is still ongoing. National safeguarding reforms are still being implemented. And Olga Domin is still waiting for every answer about how her daughter was failed. If this story moved you, if it made you angry, share it. Because the more publicly visible Sara's story becomes, the harder it is for the system to quietly reform itself without accountability. Subscribe to True Crime Britain. Turn on notifications, new cases every week, and leave a comment below. If you had been one of Sara's neighbours and heard what they heard through those walls, what would you have done? I will see you in the next one.